Aloha, welcome to this episode of Conservation Conversations Hawaii. I'm your host, Kuhea Asiu, and I'm really excited to have my guest today, Dean Tokishi, who is an ocean resources specialist with the Kaho'olawe Island Reserve Commission. Welcome, Dean.
Hey, aloha, Kuhea.
How are you? I know this podcast is going to be a lot of fun. It's been a while since we were able to catch up.
Yeah, I know.
So I want to give a little background first about the island of Kaho'olawe. I was fortunate enough to work with you on the island for some time back in 2005 and 6 around. And what a great place to work. And how many years have you been with the KIRC so far?
Wow, I've been with the KIRC for 18 years now, Kuhea.
Wow, 18 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so retirement is around the corner?
No, not really. I started working when I was 10, that's why. So.
Oh, okay.
Still a long ways off for me.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the island first. Kaho'olawe is fortunately a place where a lot of people have been able to visit, because of the volunteer program, the restoration program, and your program that has enabled a lot of people to get to the island and explore and learn about it. But still, a lot of people will never get to the island. So let's bring it to them today. So Kaho'olawe is located 7 miles southwest of Maui. It's right in our backyard, literally. We can see it every day. It's the smallest of all of the major Hawaiian islands. It's considered one of the low islands, with the elevation being about 1,400 feet above sea level. Kaho'olawe was inhabited by the early Polynesians, and there was a population there, and then there was a ranching period. And of course, the island is famous for the period of bombing that it went through from, I think it was 1941 to 1990 or so, when the bombing ceased, and the KIRC came into play about 1994, I want to say. Is that right?
Yeah, sounds about right.
So we're going to talk about the restoration that's happening on the island, as well as the area that you're in charge of, which is the ocean resources. So anything basically that swims, crawls, or flies. Does that just about cover it?
Yeah. We like to say anything gets salty, sandy, or wet. That's our kuleana.
Right. Okay. Well, let's talk about you first. So where'd you go to high school, Dean?
I went to undoubtedly the greatest high school in Kahului, Maui.
Oh, you went to
Maui High School. Maui High School, the greatest high school in Kahului, Maui, without a doubt.
Well, I know there's a big rivalry that goes on between your school and Baldwin High School. And fortunately, I didn't go to either one, so I'm not involved in that rivalry. But sorry you didn't get to go to the best high school, which was Lelehua High School. So after high school, where did you go to college and what did you study?
I went to UH Hilo, studied marine science there, got a degree in marine science, and came back home.
So what got you interested in pursuing that? How did that come to be that you chose that as your career or your study?
Yeah, I think just like, all local kids growing up, being surrounded by the ocean here, going to the beach on weekends, fishing, diving, having an interest in the ocean. I took a marine science class my senior year at high school. Figure I like the ocean. I like diving. I love diving. Might as well learn a little bit more of the science side of it. And just was very fortunate to have a good science teacher, Mr. Pishoto, and from there everything just kind of fell in place.
Nice. Well, I want to ask you, who was influential in young Dean's life? And before you answer that, I hope your parents are going to watch this, because I really got to say that, your parents did such a great job of raising you and your brother Trevor. I mean, you guys are two of the most polite and nice people. I mean, granted, you're louder and more outgoing than Trevor, but the two of you are just such pleasant people, and it's got to be your parents and the way they raised you. So shout out to Mr. and Mrs. Tokishi.
Yeah, thank you, Kuhea. Yeah, and, it's our parents, it's, our grandparents, it's just, our lineage, like all of us. 7 generations that have come before have influenced everything we do to this day, and everything we do today is, going to influence 7 generations after us. So
that's right.
Yeah.
So speaking of, the next generation, and you have your own family, your own kids, and so what are any lessons or values that you learned from your parents, your awesome parents, that you are trying to pass on to your kids?
Well, that's a great question. I'm constantly learning. I feel like, yeah, I'm still trying to learn it. I'm also still trying to instill it upon my children is humility. I think that goes a far way. Understanding that, I don't know everything yet. I have so much more to learn. And even in things I think I know, I still have much to inquire about. And there's always room for learning. It literally happens daily for me.
Well, I guess that's the scientist in you also, that there's always so much to learn, and even things that you still have to prove or disprove. And so you have to be open to learning and exploring. So who was your besides your parents, who was your biggest influence when you were growing up, the young Dean?
That's a good question. And like you said, I have family, and of course my brother being a big influence, but really thinking about how I've been fortunate to be where I am. There's a family friend. His name is Mr. Tom Fujita. When I was really young, he used to take me fishing a lot with his son, Derek. And I remember being at the beach one day. I must have been about 8 to 10 years old, and we were camping. And I remember just being so stoked to be there fishing, just playing all day. And I remember telling him, Mr. Fujita, wow, this is so much fun. Thank you for bringing me, and it's all free. We're just doing this and we don't have to pay anything. And I remember him telling me at that time, you know what, Dean, it's not free. And I remember thinking, we never pay any money for come to this beach. I didn't pay any, there's no entrance fee. And I just didn't understand it as a 10-year-old and kind of blew it off. But he continued to take me fishing. He still takes me fishing actually to this day.
Wow.
Yeah, and I also specifically remember about 10 to 12 years after that, I came home from college and I was diving up on the northwest side of Maui, and being down at about 60 feet of water, and it being just completely quiet and just being, submerged in the ocean, literally. And it hit me then and there what he meant, that it's not free. It comes at an obligation to learn, to pass on the knowledge, the conservation, the right way of doing things. So he's a wise man that, again, continues to teach me daily.
So he taught you about kuleana.
Yeah.
Right. He taught you how to harvest resources to feed yourself, feed your family, but he also taught you about the kuleana behind that. Yeah,
the kuleana. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's kuleana, the responsibility. I think a lot of times is what people associate kuleana with, but I think a lot of times kuleana is not just responsibility, but it's privilege too. Yeah, to have kuleana is privilege.
Right.
And we need to remember that.
Right. Well, working on Kaho'olawe or just having a chance to visit really is a privilege, and a kuleana as well. Oh, awesome. And I think you're really one of the lucky ones that you found your passion early in life, and then you got to bring that into how you make your living.
Yeah, I am so blessed. I am very, very grateful. And I am aware of that. Thank you. Yeah.
So I actually don't know, because of course we met when we were working together for the KIRC, but what did you do before that? Did you have did you work for someone else before that?
Yeah, so prior to working with the KIRC, I was actually a part of the cleanup project on Kaho'olawe during the ordnance removal era. For 3 years, I did subsurface bomb detection.
Wow. Okay, so that's definitely putting your life at risk every day to go to work. Well, I guess somebody had to do it, right? But there's still a lot of ordnance on the island and in the water, so it's something that is top of mind for you every day you go to work.
Yeah, it definitely. When we go there to Kaho'olawe, it's one of the even actually before we set foot on island, we Ole to get on. And I think that, like Mike, our executive director, has taught us, that is setting the mindset already on what we need to accomplish, but also where we are, both culturally and safety wise. So it's preparing us. So that's, one of the very first things we do.
Right. When you go to Kaho'olawe, it's not simply for recreation. There's always a purpose, right? To go to the island. It's for education. It's to help out by cleaning up or planting, restoring the island's vegetation, or maybe helping out in your area with ocean resources, maybe surveys or something. So, or taking part in some cultural tradition. So there's not simply going to the island to explore. It's always with a purpose.
Right.
Yeah. So the island, folks are well aware that the island was bombed for 50 years by the U.S. military and all of its allies. But there was a lot of degradation that happened to the island even before that, which was by, I guess, the ranching period, and where there were goats and cattle and maybe some other types of ungulates that really denuded the forest there. And even going back further than that, because it's a low island and in the rain shadow of Haleakala, it's already a dry island, and then further impacts, right? So there's a lot of reasons why it's a dry island, and maybe gets less rain than we would like it to have or should have. But there are a lot of reasons. It's not just one particular part of history that created that situation.
Yeah.
And so I know your work is around the coast and in the ocean, but it's also very much connected to the land and what's happened on there. So can you tell us more, describe the island for folks, and kind of create a visual, if you would?
Well, yeah, like you said, it was never ever described as a lush green, rainforest. It's always been described as a very arid, low rainfall, dry shrubland, very drought tolerable plants. So again, like you said, the bombing didn't help, that's for sure. But I think what did more environmental damage than anything was were the goats and the ranching period and the ungulates that trampled. So those kind of impacts probably did more damage than anything. And then that being connected to the work I get to do in the ocean is that because of the deforestation and the devegetation of the island, mass amounts of runoff when it does rain leaves the island and enters the marine ecosystem. We estimate that it's nearly 2 million tons, 1.9 million tons of sediment is deposited into the ocean off of the island annually. And that comes in the form not necessarily of just rainfall and runoff through rainfall, but also from windblown sediment particles, where the rain may be seasonal, but the wind is constant. The southern side of the island, right in the Alinui Haha, and on the north side, having right down the neck of the Ma'alaya, between the Haleakala and the Mauna Kahalawai.
So when all that soil, then that's a lot of soil running off into the ocean. Is there any hope for ever cleaning the ocean ecosystem up with all of that soil there and settling? And I'm sure when the waves come in, it just kind of gets everything going again, and until it'll eventually settle again and keeps going through that cycle.
Yeah, you're right. Because of the soil that's coming off the island, a lot of times it's so clayous already. It's not even really topsoil so much anymore, but it's so fine, like you described. High surf can resuspend a lot of that sedimentation and start re-stressing the coral again. But to answer your initial question, is there a chance that the island can be, or the marine ecosystem can be healed again? I very much believe so. Through the work we're doing up Mauka, through some of the work we're doing, on the coastline, we're doing more coastal vegetation. I'm not sure if you remember, but I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that remember there used to be a perpetual red ring around Kaho'olawe, just always there. I remember flying to and from Hilo for college and seeing this red ring around the island. And now it's not perpetual. It's only sometimes when it's intermittent, when there is rain or really a large surf. So that is giving indication already that, on a qualitative level of data, that, we're headed in the right direction. And also the island is healing itself, I believe.
That's awesome. That's a really great indicator, and got to give hope to, you folks who have, I think, the crew that's there now and on the vegetation side, and you have been there for so long now. You've been at it for a while to be able to see these changes over time. And so the vegetation restoration that's going on, do you have any, I know you're not the vegetation guy there, but do you have any idea how many acres have been restored to this point?
Oh, I'm not sure off the top of my head what that number would be. Yeah, that would be definitely a question for our restoration program led by Paul Higashino and Lyman Abbott and Jamie Brook, who are doing an incredible job. They are literally growing vegetation where there is no soil, where you can't dig, where there isn't rain, and they're so creative and ingenious in some of their techniques. It's very impressive and very inspiring.
Yeah, we'll definitely get Paul on this show and talk about that sometime, because Paul is one of the pioneers. I mean, he's been around for so long and, worked for the Nature Conservancy and KIRC and others. And he's done a lot. He's just a creative mind. He's a creative genius for sure.
He is. And, I believe he's been titled at one point an environmental hero, which he really is.
Yeah. Also very humble guy. And I remember him always telling volunteers that would come over that, trying to grow things on Kaho'olawe is kind of like trying to grow plants in the middle of the Costco parking lot. And it definitely must feel like that. And what a big challenge. But yeah, so much creativity. And, I guess, Paul has just really opened a door to trying a lot of different things, and some things very successful and other things maybe not, but you also learn by what's not working, right?
Yeah. And that's the great thing also. Yeah, you talk about his humility, yeah, and he's as willing to share his successes as much as his failures. And like you said, because that's a huge part of the learning process, he'll say, don't do what I did here, but I found that this did work there. So yeah, he's a great teacher.
Yeah. So both of you, when you're doing your work, you have to contend with unexploded ordnance and, having that safety procedures top of mind. So that's an added challenge. Another added challenge is the historical and even modern day wildfires that have happened. There was one just last year,
February,
that burned like 30% of the island or so.
Yeah, about a third of the island.
Yeah. So when an event like that happens, do you see impacts right away in the ocean side, or does it take a while, or how does that usually pan out?
So as far as terrestrial runoff that came from the fire, it wasn't too bad. We didn't get a lot of rain after that. We got some rain, so the runoff wasn't too bad, and it was on the side of the island that was a little more leeward, so the slope and steep incline of the island wasn't as bad. So runoff or terrestrial runoff and force from the water runoff wasn't great.
Okay.
So yeah. So when I say wasn't great, I mean it didn't have a lot of speed to it. And that's a huge part. That energy, when the sediment enters the water, the ocean, that water energy, is key. Trying to break that up or slowing it down is imperative.
Right. So you folks your team does a lot of surveying, right? In the water and even via helicopter. Those are always be one of the greatest memories I have of being able to help with those helicopter surveys and, taking note of what you see in the water. That was really awesome. But talk about some of the surveys that you're taking and how you do those and how you use that information to really assess the health of the ecosystem.
Yeah. So again, we try to monitor. We are responsible for monitoring everything in the marine ecosystem. So Yes, everything from fish, obviously, to opihi, to coral, to limu, to seals, whales, turtles, you name it. Like, again, anything that's salty, sandy, or wet. You had mentioned how we teach some of the survey methods. Just last week, we took a marine science class from Maui High School over, and we taught them survey techniques, teaching them how to count fish. And as silly as it sounds, how do you count a fish? And, trying to explain to them, because that one fish swims around you 5 times, it doesn't mean there are 5 fish. You need to be cognizantly aware of constantly where you are, where the fish are going. And, the fish all look the same. An omilu looks like an omilu that looks like an omilu. But you need to be able to differentiate size, direction it's swimming, who it may be swimming with, and all those things. But yeah, and actually one thing we've started to monitor as well is our coastal sand dunes, watching change over time and see what effects our coastal plantings are having even. So we're planting, and then we're also monitoring what effects those plantings are having in the water and on the shoreline as well.
There's been a lot of effort in South Maui by volunteers to restore the sand dunes there, and you've seen a lot of changes of the shape of the dunes, the size of the dunes, and it probably has a lot to do with what they're doing to restore the vegetation. But have you ever consulted with those folks just to exchange ideas or some tips? Or
Yeah, so actually I have not personally consulted with anyone who's in charge of those plantings, but I have admired their work to the point where I've walked the dunes, like you said, seen how the shapes have changed. Some of those biggest changes I've seen is by, more North Kihei, by Suda Beach, the old Maui Lu, those areas. And also even Kealia, the sand dune structures there have changed so much. And I've walked them, meaning looking at what species are growing, what species are doing well, how they're growing, how close to the water, how salt tolerable they are, so yeah. And we've incorporated some of those species as well on Kaho'olawe, a lot of the aki, pohuihui, those species. And, to the point now our sand dune is established enough. We're starting to see success with our Milo and our Nile right on the waterfront. So it brings forth hope.
Yeah, just for people who don't know what the purpose, what the ecosystem service is of a dune system, can you talk about that? Why is it so important to restore dunes?
Yeah, well, for us, especially on Kaho'olawe, and us as an island state, like you had mentioned, we see these changes, and we're also the first to see, sea level changes. So, trying to inhibit that or encroachment is just as important on Kaho'olawe as anywhere else, because we're trying to save the beaches. And because of that, the access roads that we have on Kaho'olawe are so near the beach. If we lose those access roads, it cuts off access to a large part of the island. So, from high surf events, helping to save the beach through that, through obviously sea level rise, trying to save our beaches for that, and understand that it's a long-term process, but knowing also that the sooner we start, the sooner we'll start to see change. If, like, Uncle Rene Silva, a famous saying I remember he always said was, the result of doing nothing will always be nothing. If you don't do anything, you're not going to see change. You have to do something to see change. So that's what we're trying to do.
Very wise man, Rene Silva.
Yes.
So I got to ask you this. So when you brought the students over from Maui High School, did they look up to you? You say, hey, well, I'm an alumni.
No. First
you
of
can
all,
be me.
First of all, literally, they did not look up to me because they're all taller than I was. So that was a physical challenge. But no, I mean, I just, not wanting them to look up to me. No, not in any way. But just creating, again, it's through a grant we had written, and it's trying to create opportunity for these people who are, at my high school, just like how I was, and was very fortunate enough to have taken that class, and it led to where I am now, wanting to provide opportunity for these students as well, and say, this is the coursework you're taking, this is all the book work, but we take them to Kaho'olawe, into the field, and this is the field work you'll be able to get to do should you decide to enter the field of marine science. And I truly believe it is important to have local kids, coming into this field, because there'll be future decision makers for our resources, and who better than the kids that go to the beach every day?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I just had to ask because I miss joking around with you. So those surveys that you do and assessing the fish populations, there's something called the spillover effect. And so this is the part I want to kind of get to. I like to help answer the question for people: why should they care? Why should they care about protecting, marine resources around Kaho'olawe if they don't fish? If they don't maybe even eat fish, if they have never been to the island and have no desire to even go there, why should they care about an island that's miles away? So I think part of that question can be answered by the spillover effect that's happening. So can you discuss that?
Right. Yeah. And yeah, definitely. And to your point of spillover effect and how it benefits, I mean, in a nutshell, having a protected area as large as Kaho'olawe is, a marine managed area, which encompasses the whole island and also extends 2 nautical miles out from the island, is all part of the marine managed area of Kaho'olawe. So this area is now serving as a nursery, if you will, and where fish may be, or resources may be heavily stressed or taken from, in Kihei or Ma'alai, or even Lahaina or Lanai Molokai, open areas, if you will. This reserve or managed area serves as a nursery or even a oasis in this area where literally there are more fish than habitat, which is insane to try and think about, but we're able to prove it in some of our fish stocks where they have left the reserve. They're spilling over. The analogy I like to give is like, trying to fit 10 pounds of rice in a 5-pound bag. There's only so much space, and then the fish will have to leave. The rice will spill over, and it's going to go to other areas and help restock, help to replenish, help to
right. So you've done fish tagging, right? So have you found those tagged fish around other islands in Maui County or beyond?
Yeah, we were able to, we actually did it with acoustic tagging. So we tagged fish with acoustic transmitters in the reserve and then placed acoustic receivers at the boundary of the reserve around the island. And we definitely have the data, and it showed the fish leaving from inside, moving to outside of the reserve and going beyond. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's great. So the island of Kaho'olawe and the reserve is really sort of serving as the icebox that feeds all the rest of the islands. So
yeah, in a way. Yeah, and also I do want to mention, though, the success of the reserve is because of the respect and the cooperation we have from local fishers. Mm-hmm. Understanding how it works. I mean, of course, not every fisher knows, not every fisher will respect the reserve, but I do believe our vast majority of our Maui Nui fishers respect the reserve and understand it. They respect it because they understand the process. And that's the reason for the success of spillover. I mean, if we had fishers that were not observing the rules, that were, poaching constantly, we wouldn't have as much success. Mm-hmm. Again, but I'm not saying that all fishers do. We still do have our share of people who do come in and poach. And that's just also inhibiting the progress and success of the reserve. I mean, we're good. We can be better.
Yeah. And sometimes it only takes a few bad apples to spoil the whole barrel. But fortunately, if there's more, ethical fishermen than non, then yeah, that's a good position to be in. But I don't know if a lot of people know that fishing is actually allowed in the reserve. So can you talk about the open waters trolling program, if you will?
Yeah, so a certain type of fishing is allowed. It is permitted trolling. So we allow fishers to come into the reserve 2 designated weekends a month for trolling only. And the process is they need to register with us first. And it's a simple process. It's just filling out some forms. It's a calendar year fee of $25, and that allows you to fish 2 weekends a month around Kaho'olawe. Again, it is trolling only, and you need to remain 30 fathoms and deeper at all times. So on some parts of the island, we do provide a map and lat long GPS points for where the boundaries are and where that 30 fathom line is. And other rules of the permit is there's no commercial activity, so you can't charter your boat, you can't make money from the reserve, you can't sell your fish you catch. It's for home consumption only, and the permit's good for a calendar year.
$25 for a year-long permit. That's a pretty good deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So no commercial activity would also include not being able to take people on tours around the island. Correct? Yeah, correct. Yeah. So, and again, so that permit, the permitted trolling permit, is again only for fishing, and you need to remain 30 fathoms and deeper. And moving at all times, right?
Right, underway, making way at all times. And, but that doesn't mean you can't you can't enjoy the island, because in some parts of the island, 30 fathoms, you could be as close as, 100 yards offshore in some places, on the south side of the island, say. But, on other parts of the island, on the north coast, you're a mile out, a mile and a half. And in fact, in one part, it actually leaves the reserve. The 30 fathom mark. Yeah.
So is the 30 fathoms partly because of the UXO to keep boaters safe? Or what is the reason?
It's a little bit of that, but also it's to ensure that we're targeting pelagic fish, not habitat based, not bottom fish, not reef fish. Keeping it 30 fathoms and deeper helps to ensure that we're targeting more of the pelagic species that are moving around the state or the Pacific, even for that fact. Like the ahi, the mahi, the ono, the marlin, the shibi, the kavakavas, the tunas.
You're making me hungry, Dean. So you mentioned that you folks do like the fish gut analysis, and so what are you looking for?
So for that, at least for the fish gut analysis, that was a grant we had obtained to do non-native fish removal. That was nearshore species reef fish of Roy, Ta'ape, and Toa, which I know is close to your heart, Kuhea.
Yes, very. I'm excited that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, so we actually just finished that project. We did it for about 4 years, and we removed just under 2,000 pounds of biomass over those 4 years.
2,000 pounds. How many fish is that about?
Oh my gosh. It was, I don't know the number off my head, but it was a variety of those 3 species. So, Roy were as large as 6 pounds. And, of course, with species removal, you're not targeting just the big ones, you're targeting them all, even the small ones. So we've removed fish as small as, 2 inches, which is a real skill to try and catch.
I can imagine. And that was how were they? Was it by spearfishing, or how was that?
Yes, done? It was by selective spear take. And I'm sorry, I didn't really answer your question, but the gut and gonad analysis was to see, of those fish we removed, the non-native we removed, all of them were analyzed to find out when their peak spawning period was. Again, ideally to make it most advantageous of when removal should occur. We want to remove before they've dropped, reproductive sperm and egg, and also the gut analysis to see, what kind of predation impact they're having upon native fish.
So did that make a dent in their population at all with the removal, or?
It actually did. We did see a population change in areas where we were removing. But to me, at least, just as interesting, if not more, was the behavior change of the fish. And I thought it was really cool where we would enter the water to do our non-native removal. And, the uhus and the enenui and, the goatfish, they would just be like chilling, relaxing, like just looking at you. Where, after a while, the Roy and the top and the Toa were just booking it. They're just running. So the behavior change in itself was just as interesting to me.
They knew they had a target on their.
So I mean, how fast they're able to learn.
Yeah, that's really interesting, though. If you are gathering information that might tell you when is the best time to conduct those removal operations, I mean, that seems like it could be useful for other islands or other parts of the islands.
Yeah, yes. I mean, again, so we were doing it in correlation with moon phases. So every place differs from area to area, and we were just trying to gather information for our specific area. But we did find that right around the fullest moon and the newest moon is when gonad and sperm content was highest.
Did you have volunteer divers helping with that effort?
We had a few, yes.
Awesome, because that's a very specific skill to have.
Oh yeah.
Very cool. So opihi is another species that you monitor, and Kaho'olawe might be one of the last places where there's still a fairly healthy population. But I was walking around Front Street not too long ago, and before I would only see the other one.
Haukiuki.
Yeah. And that's all I would see. But I don't know if it's because of the pandemic and less people out there. But just a few weeks ago, I was walking along Front Street and I was looking over the ledge at the rocks below. I saw opihi, and I was really surprised and happy to see that. Yeah.
That's really good to hear. And see, I know exactly what you're talking about, because I recall as well looking over the wall in Lahaina and seeing the perfect habitat, seeing all that what some people call pink rock, or that crustless coralline, which is ideal habitat for opihi, but seeing only competing species as the Haukiuki. But that's good to hear that they're coming back then.
Yeah. Hopefully they can stay there and continue growing their population, but I don't know how long we can expect that to last. But it was good to know that with less pressure, on the population, that they can actually rebound.
Yeah, yes, actually, and opihi are actually relatively fast growing, and so they're early spawning, which is very hopeful in repopulation. But it's just the heavy pressure of take has impacted them so much where, literally in some areas, the brink of extinction.
Mm-hmm. I was raised this question in an earlier podcast, but I wasn't talking to marine scientists at the time. But I was just wondering, I know there's different species of opihi, and they all kind of live in different zones of the ocean. And, I don't know if you have a prediction of what's going to happen to the opihi when there is continued, effects of climate change and sea level rise, and species that might be more in the splash zone are now inundated with water. Is there hope for them to adapt, or what do you think?
I think that's a great question, Kuhea. I think there is hope, to answer your question, and the basis of my hope is, in 2012, I was fortunate enough to go to the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, the Papahanaumokuakea monument. And, if we want to look to the future of what our islands are, headed towards, it's right there, those atolls, those high standing sea cliffs. And you're exactly right. Talk about habitat compression happening. That is exactly what's happening up there. And the commingling of those species, like you said, specifically the alina and the makaiuli. It is theorized that there is some hybridization happening because they're in such close proximity because of habitat compression.
Mm-hmm. There was a article that came out recently in Hakai magazine that was talking about how the opihi may be adapting due to human pressure. You read that article, yeah? So what did you think? What's your opinion on that?
That was a really interesting article, actually, and it was you brought to my attention. Thank you. it was interesting to read. And what I think is that I wouldn't doubt it. Because we're already seeing, talking again about comparison to areas, the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, when we were doing surveys up there, we found out that the opihi maturation was occurring later than in the main Hawaiian Islands. And the reason for that is because there's no pressure, there's no take occurring over there in the monument. But here in the main Hawaiian Islands, there's so much take. There's literally no bag limit, no seasonality. There is a minimum size, but that minimum size is actually based off of the L50, or where the length of that opihi, 50% of the population has spawned, but it's actually smaller than what it is. The L50 is smaller here in the main Hawaiian Islands than it is in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. Again, our opihi here are being pressured to reach sexual maturity earlier because of the strain on the population.
And then the article also talked about, I guess, the shell, how the opihi that are flatter in shape are harder to pick. So they're kind of making it harder to be harvested because it's easier for them to stick to the rock. I don't know.
Yeah, which again makes sense. I mean, evolution would tell you, the opihi that gets to stick on the rock will get to reproduce versus the opihi that didn't. Yeah. But yeah, like you did mention, it was very interesting in the article how it also mentioned, though, that those opihis that may be lower may be more vulnerable to sea level rise. So it was kind of a give and take sort of thing. So yeah, that article was very interesting.
One of the coolest things that you showed me on island was that snail that causes the opihi to kind of panic and almost pick up its skirt and book it. I've never seen an opihi move that fast. I didn't know they could move that fast. But what is the name of that snail? It's a natural predator, right?
Yeah, it's makaloa is the Hawaiian name. And it's a predatory snail to the opihi. And the reason we found that out is because at one point we're not any longer, but we were looking at possibly transplanting opihi from high populated areas on Kaho'olawe to areas where we're less dense, in hopes to have to jumpstart that repopulation. And what's interesting enough is that the opihi actually, if you cut their foot when you pick them with your butter knife or your screwdriver or whatever, if you cut the foot, they'll bleed out, they'll die. They don't have a clotting mechanism. So we were looking at a method of plucking them so they would not be harmed, they wouldn't bleed out. So then we found out about this predatory snail, but we don't transplant them because of we didn't want to change the biodiversity of an area.
But what a cool thing to witness, though. I never would have believed it. I mean, it was just so fascinating to see how fast opihi can move when they want to.
Yeah. At the least, it's entertaining. That's for sure to see. But yeah, it's we try not to do that too often. We don't want to stress out the opihi or harass.
Yeah, they're definitely harassment. So one thing that is a global issue and for sure impacts Kaho'olawe also is marine debris. There's a lot of trash that washes up on the shores, and there's an annual cleanup that happens. And so let's talk about that for a little bit. What kind of things do you most often see washing up, and where are these items coming from?
Wow, yeah. So we do have cleanups. They're no longer annual anymore, just because of funding and the cost to get the debris out. Helicopter, because of our logistics and our location being so isolated, a lot of times we need to fly the debris out, and that's a huge cost. But we are actually did obtain a NIFWIF grant, and we're going to be doing a cleanup we're actually working on right now that is allowing us to go to one specific place on Kaho'olawe in Kanapo, Keone Uli Beach, in Kanapo Bay, where is our mass gyre of debris washes in. We estimate about 2 to 3 tons of debris comes ashore there annually. Your question of what do we most commonly see, it is long lining derelict fishing gear, everything from hagfish traps to oyster spacers to, alcohol crates. But that's not to say that there isn't local trash as well coming in. Molokini is across the channel. We've found pretty much everything you can think of there. I joke with people, it's like Hasagawa store. You can find anything there, except everything's just a little used. Yeah, we've found shopping carts. We've actually, the most unusual thing that I think we found there is a bowling ball. Actually, more than one. We found 2 bowling balls. Yeah.
Oh. Do you think that those could be coming off of like cruise ships or something? Because they probably have bowling alleys on ships. Just a guess.
Maybe, possibly.
And there's something about slippers and only finding the left side, right?
Yeah, it's always the left side. So if you're missing a left slipper, it's probably in Kanapo.
Hey, trash to one person is a treasure to someone else. You never know.
Truly.
Yeah. So, with that, my next guest is going to be Cheryl King, who runs the Sharkastics organization that focuses solely on marine debris and not only cleaning it up, but really trying to study it and get to the bottom of how to resolve this issue and where it's, where the root of the problem is and trying to deal with it that way. But also I wanted to mention that this Sunday at 6 p.m., I believe, on OC16 is going to be the new episode of Outside Hawaii. And they are going to be focusing on marine debris. And so we have a little clip here that we want to show.
We explore plastic waste in the ocean, coming from near and far. We'll learn how native wildlife are seriously affected by plastic that we carelessly throw away, and how volunteers are cleaning up our beaches. And we'll learn from musical artist Tavana McMoore and friends who are bringing attention to this problem. Tune in to Outside Hawaii, only on Spectrum OC16, 100% original, 100% local.
So this is going to be a great show. I had a sneak preview, and it's going to be awesome. You're going to learn a lot and also find out some unlikely supporters of marine debris cleanup. So tune into that. So Monksio, so of course the work that you're doing with preserving the reef fish and that whole ecosystem is also important to the monk seals, right? They depend on that for their food. So what kind of research is going on with the monk seals?
So our monk seal surveys around Kaho'olawe, basically we do coastal hikes monitoring the whole west side of the Kaho'olawe, all the sandy beaches, and we've hiked the coastline. Just monitoring presence of monk seals. And of course, also, we have had pup birthing on there. So, in my opinion, more than a feeding area, Kaho'olawe serves more as a refuge, I think, for them, an area of rest where there is little to no human stressors or impacts. The monk seals can come ashore without having to worry to be bothered by, passing cars or flashing light bulbs or, flashes from cameras, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And also a peaceful area to pup, to give birth. So we haven't had a pup birthing actually in a while. I take that back. We haven't documented a pup birth on Kaho'olawe for a while. I think it's because our frequency of being there a lot less. When we were there a lot more frequent, it was monitored a lot closer.
So the island really is a refuge for a lot of things, not just the fish and the opihi, but also the monk seals. And so it's important reserve for, another endangered species, monk seals. And in addition to that, I don't know if they still occur, but there were annual whale counts that happened, and I was really lucky to be able to help out with those as well. But do those still occur?
So again, due to cost reduction in our budget, if you remember, all of our whale counts that we did were on the weekends, and we used to helicopter out there. Helicopter costs, again, is a huge impact to our budget. So actually the KIRC has not participated in a whale count in quite some time now.
Oh boy! Well, if it ever starts up again, please give me a call. And I want to bring up a picture that we have from one of those trips. And even though Kaho'olawe is a dry island overall, it's a low island, and it is often hot. But there are days when it's like super cold, ridiculously cold. And this picture here with my hair standing up proves that point.
Yeah, I remember. I'm not sure if you remember that day, Kuhea, but it was a super windy day, and to the point we actually canceled our survey. We had to call back the helicopter to come back pick us up, and yeah, your hair shows how windy it was.
Yeah, even down at the coast, sometimes it can be really, really cold. So don't go if you ever go to Kaho'olawe, folks. Don't assume it's always gonna be warm and hot. There can be very cold moments too. All right. So, can you discuss, we talked about, the vegetation, the restoration and the ocean resources program, but, there are other things that go on like education opportunities and cultural practices, that some of which I know that the makahiki was something that was brought back after a very long time when the island was brought back into the hands of the state of Hawaii. So can you talk a little bit about some of those things? And again, maybe because of the pandemic, I don't know if some of these things were affected, but what are some of the things that are traditionally held on the island?
Yeah, so great point about the different programs we have. And actually, really the first and foremost, Kaho'olawe is a culture reserve. And because of that, everything falls within it. The restoration, the ocean program, the protection of the ocean is because first and foremost, the island of Kaho'olawe is a cultural reserve and a treasure. And so everything falls within that. And your reference to the makahiki ceremonies, yes, they were held despite of the pandemic. And I think it's just a testament to the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana and their commitment to the cultural ceremonies that need to occur. So, of course, modifications were made of how many people could come, social distancing, masking. Of course, all safety precautions were taken. But the pandemic did not stop the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana from still carrying out the makahiki ceremonies opening and closing. So our cultural program works very closely with the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana, who are also our stewardship partners of Kaho'olawe. Being a state organization, the KIRC is, we do look to and defer to a lot of times the cultural aspects of ceremony and partner with the PKO, the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana.
Right, it's kind of the foundation, right, of how everything happens.
Exactly, yeah. It's the foundation. Everything falls in place because of it.
Yeah, my first trip to Kaho'olawe was with the PKO, and so it was a life-changing experience for sure. Have you ever been able to bring your family there?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to share some of my experiences on Kaho'olawe with my family. My two daughters and my wife were able to come twice, so they have memories of their own as well on Kaho'olawe.
Okay, so when you're gone for a week at a time, they know exactly where you're going.
They know exactly how hard I'm working.
Right.
The harsh conditions.
That's right. And having to snorkel in the ocean and all that, ride on boats around the island and things like that.
I am very lucky. I cannot argue that. I am very, very fortunate.
So, just going back to what we were talking about earlier, with everybody who goes there goes or should go with a purpose in mind. And that purpose is directed at healing the island, from everything that it's been through, and contributing in some positive and meaningful way. And really, the work that the KIRC does, you're just sort of the caretakers for now, because the island is, one day when there is a recognized sovereign Hawaiian government, the island at that point would be turned over to that government and no longer under the state of Hawaii, correct?
Yeah, exactly. We are just the caretakers. We're just a conduit right now, going from between transition. And like you had started the show off with, there was historic era, pre-contact. There was a ranching era. There was a bombing era, and right now it's just the KIRC era, and that's just all it is. We are going to be passing it on to the sovereign Hawaiian Nation, and I tell people all the time, the day the KIRC goes away because of that, that's going to be a glorious day, and that's going to be a good day. And we as the KIRC are just holding this island and its resources in trust, and we want to be able to hand over a product, for lack of better words, in better condition than where we got it. So the analogy I like to use all the time is, local style, you borrow somebody's car, before you return the car, you're going to, put a little bit of gas inside. Maybe not fill the tank anymore because gas is kind of expensive, but, maybe wash them a little bit, wipe the windows at least, and then return the car and say thank you. You borrow somebody's shirt, you're going to wash it, fold it nicely, and return it and say thank you. And that's kind of what I see what the KIRC's role is right now, is we're taking care of the island. We want to make sure when we do hand it over, it's going to be in better condition. It's going to be better vegetated. There'll be less runoff. The marine resources will be able to account for what's where and what's not there, and so change can be monitored into the next phase. So we're carrying the baton right now in a very long marathon, and we're just one leg of the race.
So how can people help? I mean, can people help in any way? I know you folks accept donations, and I don't know what kind of volunteer recruitment you folks are doing right now, but how can people, what are all the different ways that people can help?
That's a great question. Yeah, we always could use support. Again, volunteership is always needed. With this COVID, though, we have reduced the amount of people we can take to island, at least for now. And in this situation we're in now, so we're reduced down to, I think, 2 groups a month, one consisting of 8 and one consisting of 5. So that's a dramatic cut down from what we were taking prior to COVID. But so we can always use volunteership, though. With a staff of, 12 and a field staff of, I don't know, I think we've got like 5 or 6 field staff. We do need the hands, the boots on the ground, so to speak. That's always needed. And you can always find out how to volunteer by accessing our website. And there's a volunteer part of that page on our website. But also it's just learning about Kaho'olawe and spreading the gospel, if you will, of what we are doing and why we're doing it there. And a lot of times call for help will be sent out during legislation, during bill writing, or support for Kaho'olawe is needed through funding. So that a lot of time writing testimony to support the work we're doing. The voice of the public is stronger than anything.
Mm-hmm. True that. And there's also, I think, maybe a quarterly newsletter that comes out. And
yes.
People, I think, can maybe sign up to receive that newsletter. And I don't know if it's being distributed electronically. I know I still receive the hard copies, but that's another good way of keeping up with the progress that's going on.
Yes. So we do have a quarterly newsletter that comes out, as well as an annual report that comes out. Our public information specialist, Maggie, she works really hard on that, putting those out. And so that's a great way to get information. And yes, they are electronically sent out as well now. But if, you like the hard copy, we have those for you as well.
Yeah. I need to switch over to the electronic copy. Save some trees. So Dean, during this pandemic, I know you, you've still been working throughout, but have you had a chance to learn any new skills?
Like you say, yes, I'm very fortunate. I was very lucky to be able to continue working through the pandemic. As far as new skills, I've been working on a lot of country singer impersonations. No.
Give us a sample right now. Come on. I give you $20.
that part out, Kuhea. I just was joking. But no, I've been lucky. A friend, a close friend of mine, Brian Nakamoto, he has a boat, and he's been very generous in allowing me to go out with him sometimes. And so I've been being able to fish off of boat recently, which is, wow, a real luxury after, fishing from shore all your life and diving from shore. Fishing from a boat has been a real privilege.
So what catch are you the most proud of?
I think they're all equally the same. I mean, I'm always proud to be able to bring home fish for not just my family, but, through this pandemic, we've been able to feed a lot of our neighbors and community members where, like you said, I've been lucky to continue to working, but, this pandemic really showed me, I didn't realize how many people in my neighborhood were depending upon the visitor industry. So, we were able to bring home some fish and being able to share with the community is, that's felt really good, and being able to share with others. That's the catch I'm most proud of, is the catch I'm able to share with the community. Through this pandemic, I've seen our community really come together in ways like that. It's not just me, it's so many other people. Throughout the community have really come together.
Awesome. So, it's just, you're very fortunate that even though you get to spend your time in and on the water for work, you're also doing that in your free time. So it's something obviously you enjoy doing. Oh, yeah.
Again, I know how lucky and blessed I am, not just to be able to do it, but to have a wife and family as understanding to let me do all of those things. Because, one more, I'll tell you the story real quick. What always brings me back, I remember when I first started working at the KIRC, having to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and have to be at the boathouse and meet to get the boat ready. And I remember walking down my driveway with my fins and my mask and a fishing pole, because we were going to do some fish tagging at 4 o'clock in the morning, and being grouchy, I got to wake up so early to do this stuff, to go to work. But then I looked down and I had my fins and my mask and my fishing pole, and I was going to work. And you know what? Never again should I have the, reason to complain about what I'm privileged to do and lucky enough to be able to do.
Right. How dare you complain?
Yes. How dare me?
So is there anything, assuming that we're going to come out of this pandemic maybe later this year, is there anything that the Ocean Resources Program is looking forward to in 2021, something new, some new venture?
Yeah. We actually, so because of the pandemic, obviously, first thing I'm looking forward to, when the pandemic does let up, getting more community members and more volunteers out to Kaho'olawe again, because having people out there just brings life to the island. And again, being lucky enough to share what we know and what we're doing, why we're doing it on Kaho'olawe is I can't speak for all of my staff members, but I'm pretty safe that I can in saying, no, we love doing it. It's one of the highlights of our job, being able to do that with the community. But also what I'm looking forward to are some grants that we were able to push back because of the pandemic. But so getting to some of those working grants, again, the debris cleanup in Kanapo, removing a minimum of 5 tons from that beach. Looking forward to doing that. Doing more planting on the beach. We got another small grant to do at least, I think it's 6,500 plants we're going to put on the shoreline of Honokanaia and Honokanainai to stabilize that beach. Again, finishing up this grant with Maui High School's Marine Science program, taking more students out there. We have 2 more trips planned with them. And again, it's high school teenagers can be a tough nut to crack at times. I'm not always sure we're getting through to them, but when that connection is made and you do see some kind of a light bulb go off, and it's not just a glow from their cell phone, it's gratifying.
All of that is awesome, and a lot to look forward to, and I wish you all the best with that. And everything that you folks do over there, it's not for everyone, despite how, great the work is and the cause. It's not for everybody. If anybody is contemplating wanting to go to the island, is there a message? What do you want to tell them? How should they be prepared? I mean, mindset. Who does well on the island?
Yeah, so it is physically laborious work. We are in the field all day, and to the point where it starts with could be a 2-hour boat ride. And it's not a pleasure cruise at times. It's rough, it's wet, it's cold. And then some of our incidents have happened when volunteers getting off the boat. So right from the start. So you need to be very mindful of where you are if you want to come to Kaho'olawe. And again, like you said, with a purpose, not just to look-see around and, niele, but to have a purpose. And it is physically demanding. But at that same, we don't want to straight out turn on anybody. So if they have any questions, contact the KIRC, find out, what we're going to be doing and, how we're doing it, and to see if it is fit for you. Sometimes
the water, especially on the backside, could be so rough, or it was, that song from Gilligan's Island, the opening song. I literally had that song running through my mind whenever that happened, just like automatic. And I'd be like, wow. But, I always had faith in the captain. And so that was always, I never felt panicked or anything, but that song.
Always. It just, again, we've got a great boat captains. We have 2, Lopaka and Grant, and we've got great crew members, and we always feel safe. And our vessel is awesome, who was awesome. It's just the 4.5 hours of pounding can get gets old.
Grant and Lopaka, they really, and Captain Lindsay before that, really they take their job seriously and everybody's safety seriously. So, I never did panic, but it was, sometimes we're pretty sketchy. It was an adventure for sure, but I never felt unsafe.
Yeah, and you're right. Captain Charlie Lindsay. I mean, that guy has taught me so much. I mean, I was able to glean so much information from him, old school and new school. The guy he's a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for spending this time with me, Dean, and for being here, and keep up all the great work that you and everybody else at the KIRC is doing. It's really important work, not just for Kaho'olawe, as you mentioned, but, kind of being that reserve and that spillover effect that benefits all the rest of the islands. So thanks for everything that you folks are doing.
Yeah, thank you, Kuhea. Thank you for giving me and the KIRC this opportunity to speak in your show. Thank you for not just allowing me to speak, but I've been watching all of your podcasts. They're awesome. You do a great job in having the flow of conversation go, asking the right questions, keeping it light when need be, but yet asking the questions that need to be asked. So, Kuhea, thank you very much for everything you do for our community.
Oh, thanks for that, Dean, and definitely hope I can get out to Island and spend time with you guys again. So thanks to you, thanks to KIRC, thanks also to the PKO for what they do for the island and really providing that important foundation for everybody who goes to the island. And I want to thank our producers, the Riff Wailuku. Thanks, guys, for bringing this show to everyone today, and also to our viewers. Without you, we wouldn't have a show. So thanks for watching, and if you like what you're seeing, please like and subscribe to this show. And if you have a question or you have a topic that you'd like to see us cover, by all means, please put a message in the chat, and we'd be happy to take a look at that. And again, please tune in to this Sunday to the OC16, 6 p.m. for the Outside Hawaii show, and where they'll be talking more about this marine debris issue. Aloha, and thanks for joining us. Aloha. Oh, wait, sorry. There you are. There you are. Okay. I sound okay to you?
Yep.
All
Loud
right.
and clear. Lima
All
Charlie.
right. You are loud and clear too. Woohoo.
What is in that hydro flask wine cup of yours, Kuhea?
I can't say.
In
fact, I should turn the label around. Okay. What's in your flask?
Straight water. It is true. The camera adds 20 pounds.